Hello, this is Dr. Bauer, and I'm recording a video about how to use the TI-83 or TI-84 graphing calculator. We'll cover most of the aspects of using this calculator. There are some things in statistics that we won't quite get to, but we'll get to a lot in this video. Alright, as you see on the screen, the first section of the notes here talks about calculator modes, and I'm going to turn on this calculator here and get it to the main home screen. So there's the main home screen, but if you hit the mode button, which is right here, you'll see a various number of modes, and there's the normal calculation mode, there's the scientific or engineering. Generally you want the normal mode. There's the floating decimal point. Generally that's how you want it, floating decimal point, but you could limit your decimal points to 0, 1, 2, 3, up to 9 decimal points. You have radians or degrees. You can switch to either one of those. On the paper, on the Word document, it's in degrees, but unless you're using trig functions, that doesn't matter. You want to have it say functions for the mode as far as what type of function is being calculated. You want it connected, not just dots, for the function, so it'll make what looks like a smooth curve. You want it sequential, and you want it real, and you want it full. So those are the settings generally that you want to have it on. To leave this mode, you just go second and then hit the mode button again, which is really quit. Second quit. Alright. On the TI-83, let me get into the main screen. If I hit the mode button, there we go, and I can change this radians to degrees. So there you go. And then second quit. Alright. So now basic operations. There's 4 basic operations: the plus, minus, multiplication, or division. And they are the buttons on the right side here, along here, or along here. They're blue in the TI-83. So, of course, those are typical operations. Now, one thing you need to understand about these is that they are binary operations, which means you have to have 2 numbers in between, and have the operation symbol in between those. So 5 plus 12, all right, you have to have 2 numbers. If you just go plus 6, if you just go plus 6, now it's wanting to do that. All right, let's go 5 plus and hit enter. It's going to give you an error. Now, why it was doing the previous thing was that it always, if you don't enter a number first and you just hit one of those operations, it will take the previous number that was calculated as, the first number, and then you'll do the operation, and then it'll get, if you put a second number in there, it will calculate what you previously had with the new number, right? Now, if you notice, if you have something like 5 divided by 12, it puts that slash, that backslash, and that's for division. And so 5 divided by 12 is 0.416666666 repeating, but at some point it rounds it to the right, or however many digits it'll fit on the screen. Okay. Now, one thing students sometimes do is when they have to do a problem like 5 divided by 12, sometimes they'll put the bigger number in there first, even though they want 5 over 12 or 5 divided by 12. If they did this, 12 divided by 5, you'll notice it's a number greater than 1. Well, whenever your numerator, the first number, is larger than your denominator, you're going to have a number greater than 1. But if the original problem was written as 5 over 12 or 5 divided by 12, then you're going to end up with a number less than 1. So you need to mentally check that to make sure you didn't switch that around. Now when you do multiplication, like 8 times 7, it'll put that asterisk. So the symbol indicated for the multiplication is the asterisk. Now the negative sign is something that students get confused with too. The negative sign is at the bottom of the calculator right here, and that's different than the subtraction sign, which is right here. The same thing for the TI-83. This is the negative sign, while this is the subtraction sign. So the difference is that when you're doing a negative sign, you're putting it in front of the number to make it negative, like -3. And then you can add to that whatever number you want, -3 plus 6, okay? You get that. But you will get an error. Let's say you did 8 and then you put -5. Well, the calculator doesn't understand that because it's expecting subtraction, not the negative sign. It'll give you an error. All right, you see the error there. So the problem is that you're not doing an operation like subtraction. See, there's a difference. So that one was okay. 8 minus 5 is okay. Or you could do 8 plus -5. You still get 3. But you can't do 8 and then -5 right next to each other. Okay? So the negative sign is used in front of a number, not in between two numbers to do the subtraction. Now exponents are done with the symbol right here, upside down V, it looks like. So let's say we wanted to do 2 to the 5th power, so we go 2 to the power of 5. And that'll give you 32, because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times, you'll notice, I can go 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 and get the same answer. All right. Now, the calculator does know the order of operations. So if you did, let's say 2 times 5 and then to the power of 3, it's not going to multiply the 2 times 5 first. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 to the 3rd power would be 1,000. But it doesn't give you 1,000. It gives you 250. The reason is it's really doing the exponent first, 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125, and then multiplying by 2. Or in other words, it's doing 2 times 5 times 5 times 5. And you see that's the same thing, 250. Okay? So the calculator knows the order of operations. Okay? Now, one important thing to understand on a calculator is that the exponent only applies to the item right before it. So let's say we wanted to do -3 to the power of 4. -3 to the power of 4. So what is this going to do? Well, it's going to do -3 times -3 times -3 times -3, and 4 negatives makes a positive, so it gives you positive 81. But let's say you weren't thinking and you didn't want to bother with parentheses. So if you did -3 to the 4th power, see, now it's taking the opposite of 3 to the 4th. In other words, it's going to go 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is 81, and then take the opposite of that. And so you see that it gives you -81. So there's a difference whether you put parentheses around it. See, it's really treating this negative sign here as if it's -1 times 3 to the power of 4. And you notice you get the same effect. Okay, so that's really how it's treating that negative sign. All right? So whenever you square a a negative number like -5 and you square it, which you can also do using the key x squared, you get a positive. Whenever you square a negative number, you get a positive. But when you do -5 squared like that, that's not squaring -5, that's squaring the 5 and then making the result negative. And as you see, you get a -25. So there is this difference here, right? Now square roots, they're a little bit different on the two calculators, so let's look at this. You see above the x squared button, you see square root symbol. So we go square root, and let's say we're doing the square root of 49. Well, you put 49 inside that square root symbol, and then you press enter, and it calculates the square root of 49 and gives you 7. All right. Now, what if you wanted to do square root of 49 times 2? Well, if you go square root of 49 and then just times 2, it's putting the times 2 inside the square root. And if that's not what you want, then you have to get out of the square root. You have to pull out, hit the right arrow here to get out of the square root, and then you can do times 2. And of course that would be 7 times 2 or 14. Okay? So that's how it's done on the 84. Now if you have the 83 and you do square root, so it automatically puts parentheses around it. So then you need to close the parentheses when you're done with what goes inside the square root, and then it'll calculate your answer, 7 in this case. Okay. Now, if you wanted to do square root of 49 times 2, same idea. You're going to have to go, square root of 49 and the parentheses and then times 2. All right. So you can see the TI-83 uses parentheses to tell when you're done with what's inside the square root, while the TI-84 just has your cursor inside the square root, and then you got to get it out of the square root when you want to type things that are outside the square root. Okay. Now if we wanted to do something like square root of 3 squared and then plus 4 squared, which, what is 3 squared plus 4 squared? Well, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 9 and 16 make 25, so the square root of 25 is 5. Okay? Now in the case of the TI-83, you have to go, 3 squared plus 4 squared, and then end the parentheses. If you don't end that parentheses, it'll give you a wrong answer. Okay, like for example, I can go square root of 3 squared plus 4 squared, and I don't end the parentheses. Oh, it's giving me the same thing. I didn't realize that. I guess it just takes the whole line. All right. So then the next thing is scientific notation. Now, let me clear these out. So in the TI-84, if I do a very large number, let's say I'm doing this very large number, like lots and lots and lots of digits. Now the calculator can't display all those digits. When you press enter, look what it does. It does the first several digits, but then it does E27. E27, which means that it's switching to scientific notation. E27 means that no, my camera's not in focus anymore. E27 means that it's switched to scientific notation. Okay, so what that means, it's the same thing as 7.8545567 times 10 to the power of 27. You do that and look, it's the same thing. So this E27 really means times 10 to the 27th power. Okay? And that's what will happen if you do large numbers. Now let's do some calculations over here with some big numbers. Let's say I go, 2, 5, 6, 0, 0, 0, 0, and put a lot of zeros times another big number. Well, it's going to go to scientific notation 2.2952928 E21, which means times 10 to the 21st power. Okay? So whenever you see that E, that's really going to scientific notation. Now if I went 0.000000000, lots of zeros and then 18 at the end, it does scientific notation, but it uses a negative exponent. Okay? I'm not sure if something like this is going to do the same thing. Yes, it does. Okay. So it wasn't even a matter of not being able to fit on the screen. It just automatically switches to scientific notation at some point when it's a very small number. All right. Now, how do you type in a scientific notation number? Let's say you want to type in a scientific notation number. Okay. Do you see above the comma here? Let me move this up. Above the comma here, you see an EE. So that's what would cause it to be exponential notation or scientific notation. So if I want, let's say, 4.78, and then I hit second comma or second this EE, and then you put in your exponent, let's say to the 23rd power. So now I have this number 4.78 times 10 to the 23rd power entered in my calculator. All right, that's a very large number. I can also do a negative exponent like 2.544 and then second EE and then to the negative 5th power, for example. Okay, so I can put in small or large scientific notation numbers. All right. Now, in the next section, they talk about graphing functions. Let's look at this. This is mainly used in Math 129, but it also there's one instance in Math 220 in statistics that it's also used. All right. So first of all, if you hit y equals in the upper left corner, you'll get what's called the function editor. The function editor is the place where you put in functions, okay? And then if you type a function in there, you can see the results. So let's say we do 5, and then I want to use this key right here for the x. 5x minus 2. Okay, 5x minus 2 is a linear function, a line. All right, so I've typed that in. Now, there's two ways you can see what the results of this function are. One is a table. Now, you see the word table right above this graph button? If you go second table, it will show you the results of this function. So when x is negative 1, y is negative 7. When x is 0, y is negative 2. When x is 1, y is 3. So it gives you a table of values, and you can scroll up to just see the positive ones, or as high as you want, or you could scroll down and see the negative ones as low as you want. But that will give you a table of values so you can graph it. Okay? Now that's the first thing you can do is see a table. Now there is a way to change this so it's not going by ones and it's not starting at 0. You can start at any place and make it go by whatever increment you want. And all you have to do there is hit the table set. Now you see above the window button in blue it says table set. So if I go second table set and I can set my starting number. So let's set my starting number at 6, for example. And then my increment, instead of by 1, let's go by 0.5. So now if you hit table, notice the table is starting at 6, and it's going by 0.5. So 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5, 9, etc. And then it's giving the y values. So let's change that back to what we had it before, 0 and 1, and then we'll go back to the table. All right, so that's your table there. Now, the calculator can also graph those results of that table. And the easiest way to do this is to go zoom 6. Oops, let me turn off a stat plot here. I've got a stat plot on that I shouldn't have on, so let me turn that off. Okay, now I'll hit graph. Okay. So that's the graph of the function 5x minus 2. 5x minus 2. So you can change it to any function you want. So if I hit y equals, now let's change this to x squared minus 3x minus 4. Okay. So now if I hit graph, it's a different shape. It's not a line, it's a parabola. And that's because the function was a quadratic function, x squared. All right. So what does zoom 6 do? Well, zoom 6 allows you to see the graph in what's called the standard viewing window, which is 10 to the left, 10 to the right, 10 down, and 10 up. So it's 10 in every direction. And that's zoom 6. You see zoom and then 6 there is Z standard. That's called your standard viewing window. All right. Now if you hit window, you'll see what the settings are for that standard viewing window, which is from -10 to +10, and then for the Y min and the Y max from -10 to +10. And then the scale, X scale and the Y scale, they're each 1 because the reason for scale is the slash marks. It tells you how much each slash mark is worth. 1 unit. All right. But I could change that to maybe 2 units so that every slash mark is now 2. So now every one of these marks going left, right, up, or down is 2 units. Okay? So you can mark it off in whatever units you want. But the X minimum, that's to the left side, the X max, and the Y min and the Y max, they're just your boundaries of what you can see of the graph. Okay. Now let's scoot down the notes. So often we want to think about what the domain and range are. Your domain is really what you're going to set your X min and X max to surround that domain, and the same thing for the range. All right, let's move on. We can talk about the other things later. Now, under the next category, finding various y values for a graphed function. Well, if you go to the graph, let's say we wanted to know a particular y value of a particular x value. So you see the word calc above trace here. You can go second calc, and the first item there is value. So if I press enter, now it's asking me for an x value. So let's say I put in 4 for x. All right? It's telling me that when x is 4, that y is 0. And you see 4 to the right and 0 right there. Okay? Let's do that again. Second calc, value 3. All right, well, what do you predict would be your y value when x is 3? Well, it looks like it's going to be down here at negative something. Sure enough, 3, negative 4. Okay, so it'll tell you your y value for whatever x value you want to plug in. All right, now a 0 of a function is the place where it crosses the x-axis. So where does it look like it crosses the x-axis here? Well, it looks like about negative 1, and it also looks like it crosses here at 4. And so if you go second calc and go down to the second item, 0, then it's asking me for the left bound, so I'm going to move my cursor to the left side of where that 0 is I want to find. Let's say we want to find this one. So I'm to the left side of that, and then press enter. And then move it to the right side of that, which I've done. I'm to the right of where the 0 is. Press enter, and then you just hit enter when it says guess. Just enter again. It finds the 0 at negative 1, which we would have guessed. All right? And then if you want to find the 0 on this side, you just need to surround it with left bound, right bound, surrounding that value. So you would go second calc 0, well, that's definitely on the left side of it. Press enter, and then move it to the right side of it. Press enter, hit enter again when it says guess, and it finds that at 4 it is crossing the x-axis, and that's what a 0 is. All right. We're going to move on to later on, because this is really for statistics more, this video. So I'm going to look at the section of these notes that's talk about finding descriptive statistics. All right. So and all these functions are the same as on the TI-83. All right. So then I cleared there. And so what I want to do is finding the average, let's say, of a set of numbers, or finding the standard deviation or some other thing. If you hit Stat and go to Edit, all right, now in there you'll see various columns where you can put in data. These are editing columns, so I can add my data, edit my data, whatever I want to do with my data. So let's say we put in a bunch of numbers. So I'm going to put in, 5, 8, 4, 6, 7, 7, 9, 12, 4, 5, 4 again, 6, 3, 9. So there I got a bunch of numbers. Now how many numbers do I have? Well, actually, I've got not 15 numbers, but if I move up to the last number, that's number 14. So we've got 14 numbers in there, all right? So now, let's say I want to do some, or get some statistics about these numbers. Well, if I hit Stat and just go over to Calc, just move my right arrow over to Calc, and I do item number 1, one variable statistics. So I press enter on that, and then I want to use list number 1 to calculate my statistics, and I press enter, and it will calculate the numbers. All right. So what are these symbols? Well, X bar, that's the average or the mean. This is the sum of all the x's, 89. This is the sum of all the x's squared. This is the standard deviation of the sample, and this is the population standard deviation. And then it tells you how many numbers there are. It also tells you the minimum number. It also tells you the Q1. We'll talk about that in statistics later. The median, which is 6, Q3, and the maximum value. So it gives you several numbers from that set of data. All right. Let me switch over to the TI-83 because things are a little bit different in the TI-83 in one aspect. So if I turn this on and I hit Stat, and I go edit. So I've got some data in here. Let me clear that out. And by the way, to clear out data, I just go up to the heading and I hit clear. Not delete, clear. Don't hit delete. Just go up there, hit clear, enter. Alright, so you got to go up to the heading where it says L1 or L2 or L3 and hit clear, not delete, but clear, and then enter. Alright, so let's say I put in data again. I'm just throwing numbers in again. Alright, so I've got a bunch of numbers. Let's say 14. No, I don't have 14. I have 13. So let me put in one more number. Okay, so now I've got 14 numbers. You could have as many as you want, but there you go. Alright, so what's different about this is when I go to Stat and go to Calc and do one variable statistics, it doesn't have in the previous screen a place to put in what column you're doing, L1. So you have to type it, when you hit enter on the one variable stats, it jumps you to the home screen. And the home screen, then it's waiting for you to tell what column to do the one variable stats for. So if you look on the calculator, right above the 1 button, you see L1 in yellow. L1. That's what we want. We want column L1. So anything in yellow, I have to hit the second button. So I go second, and then I hit the number 1, and it put in L1 after the command, the one variable stats command. Now you're ready to press enter, and it'll give you the calculations. Now these are different than the other one because the numbers are all different, but it gives you all your statistics that you wanted all the way down. All right, so that's a little bit of a difference there. When you do one variable stats, you got to go Stat, go to Calc, choose the first item, one variable stats, and then you have to hit second, and then whatever the column number is, this is column 1, so L1, and then you hit enter, and it'll do it. All right. So that's how to find what's called one variable statistics, as it says here in the notes. Now, if you wanted to do some other column, let's say you want to do the statistics for L2, well, you just put in L2 there. Of course, in the TI-84, it has you do it right here after the word list. So just go second L2. So that gives you a different thing, or a different column. Now, frequency list, that's just where a list of frequencies would be if you were calculating from a frequency table. But usually we will not be doing that. All right. Now, let's say we wanted to make a histogram of a bunch of numbers that I have in the calculator. And I think I want to change these numbers to larger numbers. So I'm going to say 55, 45, 81, 75, 92, 61, 38, 40. All right, so I'm just putting in a little bit larger numbers, 2-digit numbers instead of, 1-digit numbers. That's all. All right, so I've got a bunch of numbers. Let me put in one more number to make 20 numbers. So I'll go 58. All right. So I've got a bunch of numbers in here now. And to do a histogram, first of all, I recommend that you hit the Y equals button and get rid of any functions you have in the function editor. All right. So then you need to go to stat plot. Now you see above the Y equal button, you see stat plot. So go second stat plot, and you need to turn on the first stat plot. So press enter when your cursor, you'll notice your cursor is up or down on the number of the stat plot. So just press enter to get into stat 1, and we need to turn that on, so press enter on the on word, and then so we've got that on, and then you want to go down to type, and it looks like it's already highlighted as the histogram type. So the first type is what's called a scatter plot. This is a line graph. This is a histogram. This is a box plot, actually a modified box plot. That's a regular box plot, and that's a cumulative graph. But anyway, so now we're using L1. That's where the data is, L1. And if for frequency, just put 1. Anytime you're doing this, when it says frequency, just put in 1. All right, so I've got the histogram ready. Now, I need to do 2 things. Well, actually, let's try hitting zoom 9, and then the number 9, which, if you want to see what the name of it is, it's zoom stat. Zoom stat. Now, it will produce a histogram if you do zoom stat. But the problem is the intervals or classes for the histogram will be whatever the calculator decides to do. And if you press enter, press window, you'll see what it's doing. It's using as the lowest the beginning of the first bar of the histogram at 38, and then it's using a scale of 11.2. In other words, each bar is 11.2 wide. All right. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to start at 30, some round number, and instead of X scale of 11.2, let's make it just 10. That's the width. All right. And we can change these other numbers to kind of whole numbers as well, and this can be 105. That doesn't matter really. I'll explain what that is in a moment, but okay, so there we go. And so I'm going to press graph. Alright, so now this histogram is using the same data, but it's a little cleaner. Now, it starts at 30, so along the x-axis 30, and it's going by 10. So this is 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Okay? Now notice the x max was 105. So we could have changed that to 100 because we knew that all these numbers were below 100. But I just left it at 105. It doesn't hurt anything. It just means that it includes a window going all the way to 105. Now the Y max, well, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It seems like the highest value is 4 here. So we didn't need to go all the way up to 6. I think in the window I had said a Y max of 6. If you want, we can change that to 5 or even 4. But so that's what the histogram looks like. All right. So what was the starting point? At 30. And it's going by 10, and that's because, I said it, the x minimum would be 30, and the scale for the x would be 10. And like I said, I could change this to 100 for the x max, so now it goes all the way to the right side, but otherwise it's fine, okay? So that's how to make a histogram. Like I said, you could go zoom 9 and it'll make your histogram, but if you don't like how that looks or how like the settings of the x minimum and the width, the x scale, then you just need to make those changes by hitting window and make the changes. Okay. All right, so that's an introduction to the calculator and how to make histograms and how to graph functions. So hope that was helpful.